High above the city stood the fine statue of the Happy Prince. He was gilded all over with gold leaf, and his eyes were bright sapphires. A large red ruby was in his sword. "He is as beautiful as a weather vane," said one of the town councillors, who wished to be known for his artistic tastes. One little boy in the city was crying for the moon, and his mother asked him, "Why can't you be like the Happy Prince, who never dreams of crying for anything?" Everyone loved the Happy Prince statue in the city. "He looks like an angel," remarked the children of the school. Their math teacher asked, "How would you know? Have you ever seen an angel?" "Of course," said the children, "in our dreams." One day a lonely swallow landed on the Happy Prince for a rest. He nestled in between the statue's feet to go to sleep. But just as he was about to fall asleep, a large drop of water fell on the swallow. The swallow saw no clouds and could not understand where these drops were coming from. The swallow looked up and saw the statue's eyes were full of teardrops, and that is where the drops were coming from. "Who are you?" asked the swallow. "Well, I am the Happy Prince," said the statue. "Why are you crying?" asked the swallow. "I was a happy human prince my whole life, and when I died, they put me up here to see all the city's sadness, and so I weep. I can see a very sad seamstress, who has a very sick son. She is so very poor. Swallow, swallow, will you bring her the ruby from my sword?" asked the Happy Prince statue. "Oh, but I must be leaving to meet my swallow family," said the swallow. "Oh, swallow, swallow, little swallow, will you not stay with me for just one day and help me?" The swallow agreed to stay and help to be the messenger for the prince. He flew the ruby to the seamstress's house in the night and laid the precious red stone beside her thimble. He cooled her sick child with a flutter of his wings, and the boy began to feel better. The swallow flew back to the prince to tell him all was done. "I will leave tomorrow." "Please, swallow, stay one more night to help me," the Happy Prince asked the swallow. He asked the swallow to take one of his sapphire eyes to help a poor playwright to finish his play. The little swallow snuck into the playwright's room and left the sapphire. The playwright was overwhelmed and could not believe his luck. The swallow returned to tell the Happy Prince how happy the playwright was. The swallow said goodbye, but the prince asked for his help again, to give his other sapphire eye to the little match girl in the square below. "But if I pluck out your eye, you will be blind." "Do not worry, little swallow. Go and join your family now." But the little swallow insisted on staying forever with the Happy Prince. The Happy Prince asked the swallow to take each leaf of his gold to help the poor in his city, and so the swallow did, as the Happy Prince asked, leaving the Happy Prince looking quite dull. The swallow stayed too long, and the cold winter made him very sick. He knew he was going to die. He told the prince he loved him and kissed him on the lips before falling at the statue's feet to his death. At that moment, a strange cracking noise sounded from inside the statue. The leaded heart of the statue had been broken. The city councillors took down the Happy Prince statue as it no longer was gold with precious rubies and sapphires. They found a dead bird at its feet and sent everything to be taken away to the garbage. God was looking down and sent 2 of his angels to bring the 2 most precious things from the city to him. The angels found the dead bird and the broken leaded heart and statue and brought them to God. God thanked them so much. He brought the little swallow back to life and repaired the statue and his broken heart. And he put them in his Garden of Eden for the little swallow to sing forever and live with his happy prince statue. Long ago, in a small village, a woodcarver named Geppetto made a wooden puppet. It looked so much like a real boy that Geppetto gave it a name, Pinocchio. The old man was so happy, he showed the puppet to his cat Figaro and his goldfish Cleo. As Geppetto showed his puppet to his dear pets, a small cricket named Jiminy Cricket snuck into Geppetto's house to have a warm night's sleep. Jiminy Cricket watched as Geppetto set the puppet down and gazed out the window at the stars. "Look at that! The wishing star!" Geppetto cried. Geppetto wished Pinocchio was a real boy. Soon it was bedtime, and Geppetto, Figaro, Cleo, and Jiminy Cricket all fell asleep. Before long, a beautiful light filled the workshop and woke up Jiminy Cricket. It was the Blue Fairy. She had heard Geppetto's wish and was there to make Pinocchio a real boy. She touched the puppet with her magic wand, and Pinocchio came to life. But Pinocchio had to prove he was brave, truthful, and unselfish to become a real boy. The Blue Fairy knew Pinocchio would need help, so she made Jiminy Cricket his helper, so he would help him to choose between right and wrong, and prove himself. Geppetto was delighted with Pinocchio, and he sent him off to school like a good parent. On the way to school, Pinocchio met a sly fox, who said Pinocchio could make a lot of money and didn't have to go to school. Jiminy Cricket didn't trust the sly fox. The sly fox said he could spend all of his time having fun in the theater instead of studying at school. Pinocchio said, "Okay!" and off he went with the sly fox to the theater owner. That night, the theater owner put Pinocchio on stage. He was a big hit as he sang and danced for the crowd. The crowd threw money on the stage. Jiminy Cricket, who was in the crowd, worried. After the show, the theater owner locked Pinocchio up and said, "You will live here and make me lots of money." Pinocchio and Jiminy Cricket wondered how he could escape. Luckily, the Blue Fairy arrived. She asked Pinocchio why he missed school. He lied. She asked him more questions, and each time he told a lie, his nose grew longer and longer. The Blue Fairy reminded him to tell the truth if he wanted to be a real boy. Pinocchio promised he would tell the truth. She fixed his nose and set him free. The next day, Pinocchio met the sly fox again. The sly fox convinced Pinocchio to not go to school, but instead play and have fun all day. Pinocchio followed the fox, not returning home after regular school time. Geppetto was worried and went to look for Pinocchio. Geppetto sailed his boat to search for Pinocchio, and he was swallowed up by a huge whale. When Pinocchio returned home from playing all day, he found this out, and he knew he must save Geppetto. Pinocchio and Jiminy Cricket found the huge whale, and they teased him with the fish. The whale grabbed the fish, the pole, Pinocchio, and Jiminy Cricket, and they were all swallowed into his belly. They found Geppetto in the whale's belly too. They must find a way to escape from the whale. They decided they would make the whale sneeze, and they would all escape when the whale opened his mouth. It worked, but when the whale saw them in the water, he thrashed around, knocking everyone about. Pinocchio had to grab Geppetto to save him. After a while, the water settled down and Geppetto and Jiminy Cricket awoke on the beach. they found Pinocchio lying lifeless on the rocks. Geppetto was heartbroken, and he carried his son home in his arms, convinced he had lost Pinocchio forever. Back in the workshop, Geppetto and Jiminy Cricket cried, and then all of a sudden, the blue fairy appeared. She touched her wand on Pinocchio and said, "Awake!" Pinocchio awoke, and the blue fairy said, "By saving Geppetto, you have proven yourself to be brave, truthful, and unselfish." "I am a real boy!" shouted Pinocchio. Pinocchio, Geppetto, Jiminy Cricket, and all the pets celebrated and danced as Geppetto's wish had come true. Pinocchio was a real boy. There once was a poor country man whose only inheritance to his 3 sons was his farm, his donkey, and his cat. The eldest son inherited the farm, the second eldest the donkey, and the youngest son inherited the cat. "What on earth will I do with a cat? I can barely feed myself," said the youngest son. "Let alone how can I offer this pet anything? I have no money and am so poor." "Don't worry," said the cat. "If you can get me a sack and a pair of boots, you will see I am the most valuable thing your father ever owned." The son brought the cat what he asked for, as he knew he had nothing to lose. The cat put on the boots and took the sack to catch a plump rabbit. The cat wore the boots on his journey. He would be called Puss in Boots. He caught a plump rabbit and brought it to the king. Puss in Boots told the king the plump rabbit was a gift from his master, the Duke of Carabas. For several weeks, Puss in Boots brought the king many gifts from his master. The king was very curious about Puss in Boots and his master, the Duke of Carabas. But the king knew that the Duke was friendly and had the most well-behaved cat he had ever met. The king did not know that Puss in Boots had made up the name Duke of Carabas for his poor master. One day, the king and his daughter were riding in their carriage by the river. Puss in Boots told his master to take off his pants and shirt and jump in the river. His master agreed to do so. Then Puss in Boots yelled out, "Help! Help! The Duke of Carabas is drowning!" as the king's coach passed by him. The king ordered his driver to stop, and he told his guards to rush over and save the Duke of Carabas. The king saw Puss in Boots yelling and knew he must help him, as he had been so generous to the king. Puss told the king the Duke's clothes had been stolen. So the king offered the Duke a fine suit of his own clothes to put on. The Duke of Carabas got in the carriage for a ride. The king's daughter quietly told the Duke he looked very handsome. The Duke looked at her and told her she was very beautiful. Along the way, Puss had asked all the farmers and workers on the road, "If the king drives by, you must tell him the owner of all these lands is the Duke of Carabas, or the ogre who lives in the castle will eat you." All the farmers and workers answered when asked that the Duke of Carabas was their landowner when the king asked them. Puss in Boots ran ahead to the ogre's castle and asked the ogre about the trick he could do by changing into a small mouse from a big ogre. Puss in Boots told the ogre no one believed he could do a trick like that. The ogre said, "Watch me," as he turned into a small little mouse. Puss in Boots grabbed the mouse and ate it up, and that was the end of the big bad ogre. Just then, the king's carriage arrived at the castle gate. Puss in Boots ran to meet the carriage and said, "Welcome to the castle of the Duke of Carabas." His master could not believe what was happening. On the long ride in the carriage, he had fallen in love with the king's daughter. And Puss in Boots had planned everything to work out perfectly. The Duke asked the king if he could marry his daughter. And the king said yes, of course. The Duke of Carabas and the princess were married and lived happily ever after in their castle. Puss in Boots was named a great lord and never had to hunt for mice ever again. Puss in Boots proved he was the best inheritance, as he had promised his master. Every afternoon after school, the children loved to play in a huge garden that surrounded a deserted castle. They loved to play there. One day while playing, a great voice yelled out, "What are you doing in my garden?" It seems the giant had returned back to his castle, and he did not want the children to play there. He shouted at them and told them to leave and never come back. They all ran away as fast as they could. The giant then built a huge spiked fence around his garden, so none of the children could ever get in. The giant put a large gate in the fence with a sign that said, "Keep out," in big black letters. The children would pass by and look sadly at their favorite place to play. They really missed playing in the beautiful garden. Soon fall and winter came and covered everything in snow and frost. The giant looked out his castle window at his snow-covered garden and wished for spring to come. Spring did come, everywhere except in the giant's garden. The snow and frost were thrilled to have a place to stay forever. One morning, the giant was lying awake in bed when he heard a bird singing. He leapt from his bed to look out the window. His whole garden was in spring bloom. The snow and frost were finally gone. Then he noticed all the children playing in his garden. You see, they had snuck into the garden through a hole in the wall, and spring had followed them in. One little boy was crying because he could not climb the trees like all the other children. He was just too small to reach. The giant helped the small boy to the top of the tree. The little boy gave the giant a hug and a kiss and said thank you. The giant thought it was time to let the children play in his garden, so he knocked down the big wall. The children played every day in the giant's beautiful garden. When the giant realized he had not seen the little boy he had helped to the top of the tree, he asked the other children, "Where is your little friend?" "We do not know," said the children. The giant asked the children every day if they had seen their little friend. The children told the giant, "The only day we saw him was the day you knocked down the wall." The years passed and the giant grew old and weak, and he could no longer play with the children. One cold winter morning, he was looking out the window, and he noticed the most beautiful tree he had ever seen.
Wow!
The tree was covered with delicate white blossoms with silver fruit, and beneath the tree was the little boy who had gone missing for so long. "He's come back at last," said the giant joyfully. Forgetting how old and weak he was, the giant rushed down the castle stairs and hurried across the garden. But as he neared closer towards the little boy, he saw bruises and cuts and nail marks in his hands and feet. "Who has hurt you?" asked the giant. "As old and feeble as I am, I will kill the people who have done this to you." The small child smiled gently and said, "Hush, don't be angry, but come with me." "Who are you?" whispered the giant, falling to his knees. "A long time ago, you let me play in your garden," the child replied. "Now, I want you to come and play in my garden. It is called Paradise." That afternoon, when the children came to play in the garden in the winter snow, they found their giant friend lying dead. The old giant looked so peaceful. He seemed to have a beautiful, peaceful, gentle smile on his quiet face. The giant was covered in small, beautiful white flower blossoms. The children thought he looked so happy and at rest. They said sweet prayers for him to be playing with children angels in a gorgeous paradise garden forever. The children always remembered the giant for his kind heart and generous spirit, and played in his garden forever.